So if you happen to stumble upon this YouTube channel for the first time, my name is John, and this is the Beyond Belief Sobriety podcast, where we explore topics of interest to people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. And we have a couple of guests here with us today, and they have a podcast themselves called the Untapped Keg, and also a YouTube channel, which you're going to have to check out. But we have Montee Ball and RJ Zimmerman. How you guys doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here, and I really appreciate this opportunity to chat. This is what it's all about. So thank you.
Yes. Absolutely. I'm good as well. So
cool.
Thank you.
Well, I love talking to podcasters for a couple of reasons. First of all, I don't have to worry about your headset and noise stuff. And it's just, I think, a really unique experience podcasting about recovery. It has been kind of transformative for me. And I like to hear from other recovery podcasters about what the experience was like for them. But before we get into all of that, why don't we start out with an introduction of both of you through your recovery story? And then we can kind of get into your podcast, how it started, why it started, what it's been like. So who wants to go first?
I'll let you go first, Mons.
All right, I'll do it. So again, I really appreciate this. My name is Montee Ball, and I'm the co-host of Untapped Keg podcast with my brother-in-law right down there, RJ Zimmerman. And I've known RJ since 2010. When he first started dating my sister, my family welcomed him with open arms. And at that time in my life, I was still, I was drinking alcohol. I was in college. I was doing all what, unfortunately, what college students do, partying and not really paying attention to taking care of my body. But my story, my story's long, but I won't get too long with it here. But it starts with the game of football for me. Mm-hmm. My story at the age of 8, wanting to be a running back for the Denver Broncos. So I was then placed on the track of playing in the NFL. And again, I was fortunate enough to play in the NFL, but throughout this entire process of getting there, I was significantly struggling with severe depression, alcoholism, and very high anxiety. That high anxiety, low lows with depression.
Right.
And it really came about when I was in college. Once I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, started to see everybody else drinking and partying. Because at first, when I was doing it in high school, I wasn't doing it a lot, but I had my parents, of course, and they were telling me, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. It's something you shouldn't be doing. Let's focus on your school, focus on your goals, where you want to get in life. But, I was a teenager, felt as if I had all the answers. But once I got to college and I started to see everybody else doing it, I then just thought that my parents were just being like every other parent out there, telling your kid to just focus on school and all that stuff. So once I made it to college, it was like I felt free and I started drinking more, partying more. And that just opened up the door, made me way more susceptible to lower lows, those depressive moments coming off of those high moments. And obviously not having a lot of experience or knowledge regarding mental health, never really addressing it, just hiding it, allowed for it to grow, manifest into something to where I really started self-medicating with alcohol.
Yep.
At that moment, I built a very strong relationship with alcohol. At first, it was just something I did in social events. Then it became something I was doing behind closed doors by myself.
Do you remember the time or the moment, and you might not, where you kind of started using alcohol like it was medicine, like it was there to help you with whatever you needed to cover?
Absolutely, yeah. In 2011, which would be my junior year in college, is when that relationship shifted from something I use in social events to something then I use to help me during my tough days. And then it became something I used even when I wasn't having tough days. I may have just felt like I was having a tough day, but again, that was the alcohol side of me talking to me, wanting that fix. And so I developed a very strong relationship with it and suffered from extreme depression. And once I was drafted by the Denver Broncos, the pressures, the societal pressures of playing on a big stage, of the demands of the game of football, and not addressing my mental health it really opened up the door for me to self-destruct.
Yeah.
I led to a self-destructive path, and then everybody around me received a different Montee.
Mm-hmm.
A very upset and angry Montee. Went from the happy-go-lucky drunk to the angry drunk, because at that moment I then knew that my playing days were coming to an end because of what I was doing off the field, and I couldn't really sit with that.
Wow.
And that then accelerated to me just not being a great partner at all, not being a great son, not being a great friend. And I just had to make a decision, man. I really had to. So for me, my turning point from excessive use of alcohol were many reasons. The birth of my child.
Mm-hmm.
But then also one thing that RJ always states, and we say it on our podcast, is also understanding that it is a selfless act that you must make, but it's also a selfish act.
Right.
As well.
Yeah. That's what they told me early on is when they were giving me my talk about, when they were firing me for my job, they said, get help, but do it for yourself.
Exactly. So my story really revolves around a significant amount of pressure to perform on the field, but then obviously just wanting to be a student, wanting to just be a normal person, living in the limelight, living in that fishbowl experience where all eyes are on you,
that's
criticism constantly, and just I self-medicated, and that's what made me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But since therapy, the podcast, and obviously RJ being in my corner, I can say today that I am strong in my recovery from alcohol. It is something that I'm proud of, and something that I'm excited for. So again, don't want to get too long with it. I want RJ to go, but I'm thrilled to be here.
Super. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. So RJ, what's your story?
Well, I'm a Wisconsinite through and through.
And I know about that. My brother lived in Wisconsin for a long time, and I have two nephews that are Wisconsinites, and they were living in La Crosse, where there's a bar literally on every single corner, maybe a couple bars in every single corner.
So they get
it. Sorry.
No, that's every town in Wisconsin, right? That's honestly the
it's a big drinking state for sure.
The joke is you go to any town in Wisconsin and there's at least 4 bars and a church.
Yeah.
That's so, growing up, my dad is also an alcoholic. He's been sober for 25 plus years. I think he's closer to 30 now. He just quit, and then he's a very private person, so he's always kept his emotions and everything kind of to himself. So I grew up knowing that it was a part of my family, but it's not something we talked about.
Yeah.
I just knew my dad never drank, and I knew that he had problems controlling how much that he consumed. So I, like, going through high school, first time I drank was my senior year. I was scared to get caught, scared to miss sports, but also just knowing that that's there in my family. So more than likely it's going to be me. But then I went to college, and I grew up in a small town, knew everybody, went to school with the same people from kindergarten till we graduated senior year. I'm not even joking, the same 80 kids. I graduated with 100 people. There was maybe 20 people in and out. I would say that would be a high number. It was probably less than that. And so I knew everybody from when I was a kid, but then when you have to start to make friends, you have to start to take care of yourself. Alcohol was something that it was easy to start to open up with people. And I would drink a lot. Obviously, all the deals, Tuesdays you go to this bar, Wednesdays you go to this bar, all the cheap deals. The problem was after college, I kept doing that. I learned that after a little while that I had to cut it down, and I ended up moving to a new city because I just couldn't kind of control it. My life wasn't going in a great. It was not. It was headed downward where I was, and that's because it was just so accessible. So I moved to Madison, and starting over, kind of trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And then I finally realized that I wanted to be a lineman, which is what my dad does, which is we work on high voltage power lines. Well, I didn't drink often, but every single time I drank till I was blacked out.
Yeah.
And it was often that I would end up in places that I would have no idea how I got there. Didn't necessarily know where my clothes were. Where's my car, kind of a thing.
I hated that.
And I went home with some friends, and it was right after I graduated line school, and I was trying to get a job in the career. And, in this career, I know I'm going to be on call 24/7. And I know that I'm going to have to really cut back on my drinking. And at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to have to stop. I got really, really drunk with my friends, and I ended up like leaving them and going with a bunch of other people. And I remember being at this house party and just trying to drink all of the alcohol. I mean, they had like $10 vodka, 175, and I'm just taking pulls out of it. And I'm already blacked out. Like I remember flashes of coming into it. And that was the next day. I had a hangover that I could not keep anything down until midnight the day after. And I was supposed to be back in Madison to do something with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And I texted her. I'm like, I'm not going to make it. She's like, yeah, I figured you wouldn't. And that's when it hit me. Like, I'm an unreliable person. I wake up in the mornings wondering who I have to forgive today. I look in the mirror. I don't like who I am. I've respected the person I was in high school more than I respect this person right now.
Yeah.
And if I wanted a career, if I wanted a family, I was going to have to make a change. And that change was going to have to be to go sober. So I kind of followed in my dad's footsteps a little bit. The only person I told was my girlfriend that, hey, I'm going to try to go sober. And I ended up telling one of my best friends, and luckily I told him because he kind of made it so that everybody, when we were hanging out with our other friends from high school, our old drinking buddies, he made them know, hey, he's serious. He needs this. Do not pressure him. And like, he was kind of like, he was the muscle to kind of help me get through those pressures, because I don't know if I would have gotten through those pressures, especially in the early days. Right. But that's kind of like the backstory. I mean, I fell into the Wisconsin drinking culture pretty hard, and it took a lot to get out of it. So, for the first 5 years or so, I honestly didn't even look into why I drank the way I drank. Didn't go to therapy or anything. I just, through sheer stubbornness, which through the fault of myself, didn't help me at all, but it worked. I made it through there. But since I've went to therapy right before we started the podcast, and since we started the podcast, I mean, same as you, it really has transformed my recovery.
Yeah. I'm curious about your father's experience getting sober and how that impacted you. And if you ever thought about it while you were drinking, and do you think it was a hindrance or a help? Just, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are about that.
Well, it was a help when I first started going sober.
Right.
But it was definitely a hurt with how he did it.
That's what I was wondering.
Not talking about his experiences or anything.
Right.
First time we talked about it was like last year.
Wow.
Right. I'm almost 8 years into my sobriety. And that was the first time we really talked about, he knew how I drank.
Right.
But that was the first time we talked about
Wow.
each other's, and we were very similar
Yeah.
drinkers in that regard.
Right.
And he like I said, he was a lineman. He drank while he was a lineman, and he tells stories about how he would take a trouble call, which means at the end of the night somebody's out of power. And one night it was a tornado warning, and he's out there, and next thing he knows, he's in a line truck taking a call, and he doesn't know how he got there, what he's doing there, anything.
Yeah.
And there's a tornado, right?
Mm.
Like, so
I was curious about that because I was thinking, so I grew up with a mother who had mental illness, serious mental illness, and it was something that we didn't talk about in our family ever. And it was like, so the message I got as a kid, subconsciously, I suppose, was that I should not never tell anybody about what I'm feeling or fearing, or because they might find out that I'm like my mom, and that's bad. And so I had this resistance to seeking help. And I was wondering if that might have been your case too. But then again, I'm going to say that human beings are so complex. I could have had that experience with my mom, and that might have had absolutely nothing to do with my reluctance to get help. That's just me psychoanalyzing myself. But I kind of think sometimes that it would have been maybe better in my family if we would have had a conversation about her mental illness. It couldn't have hurt.
Right.
I mean, as honestly, I think that a lot of men our age and older have the same upbringing where we don't talk about anything unless we're angry, right?
Yep.
I mean, even joy, we're taught to kind of suppress it a little bit for out of either sportsmanship, a lot of things.
The truth.
And that's something that I've learned the past, 4 years. My wife is a marriage and family therapist, so I learned it from her a little bit too, is my emotional intelligence is so stunted. Not just from the toxic masculinity that we're talking about right now, but because of I didn't know how to handle my emotions, so I drank them away. Right. That's it really has made me, as a father, want to make sure that I'm not going to follow that same path, but then try to do better now every day, try to do better at just naming my emotions. Right.
Yeah. It's like men. And certainly it was that way for me. I was taught, don't cry, that's not good. Girls will cry, but you don't cry. So anger, I guess, was how I expressed anything. Depression came out as anger. Anything came out that way. I wasn't fortunately for me, a type of drunk that would get in fights, although I would, but I would go down on the first punch. It wasn't like a real fight, but so I wasn't really violent in that sense, but I was an angry person, and really a lot of anger directed at myself. So that was a lot that I had to work through in my recovery and get to the point where, like you said, where I had to understand what my emotions were and be okay with that. And one thing that helped me a lot, I went to an all men's group, and that was just by accident. And I just happened to have a lot of guys my age, I was in my 20s, that were getting sober together. So we would run around, we'd watch football together, and we would cheer against the Broncos because we're in Kansas City. So we didn't like the Broncos. But anyway, so so we were really tight, and what was nice about that experience was that was the first time that I had friendships with other guys where it wasn't just watching football or going to movies or being crazy, but actually talking about our lives and how we felt, and so now that's just like second nature for me to do that, but it wasn't always that way.
That's important. And I'm really, I was just sitting back listening right now and enjoying that conversation right there. Cause I can relate. I can heavily relate to that. Obviously RJ knows my story very well, but it's, football. And that's why I always state that, my story starts with the game of football, because sportsmanship, the game, teaches you to suppress your emotions. Don't show your opponent that you're sweating or that you're bleeding. Obviously don't ever cry. And then the pressures of, what have you done for me lately? On top of that. So and then you're also rewarded for getting angry.
What you've done is never good enough.
Exactly.
I hate that.
Anger is the only emotion, anger and excitement, of course, but anger produces great results.
Yep.
In the game of football.
Oh my God. I discovered that as a little kid. That's crazy.
That's been reinforced my entire life.
Yep.
Anger brings about great results, which obviously does not translate well off the field.
No.
So it is this culture, this patriarchal culture, this American culture where men just, breadwinners go work, come home, don't talk about how you're feeling. You can't be tired.
Right.
Can't talk about any of that. And that's just what we hope to change.
Cool. So I'm going to get some comments on YouTube because YouTubers love to make derogatory comments about, and they're going to say, stop bashing men, stop bashing men. Well, right. We're not. We're just talking about, what we've kind of learned, and anyway. So tell me about your podcast. What was the idea behind that?
I'll jump in real quick. So honestly, got to give credit to RJ. RJ came to me about it. So I was never really into podcasts, really not at all. I'll even go back to as early or as recent as 2018. Wasn't really a podcast guy. I obviously messed around a little bit here and there, listening to a few, but never really was into it. So 2020 came about. And RJ brought it to my attention, and our goal, pretty much what he stated, and I agreed, was, we're at a very comfortable spot in our recovery. Imagine the folks who are starting their recovery this year, and now they're slapped with the global pandemic or the stay-at-home orders, forced to isolate, right?
Yep.
And so we were like, well, let's create another medium for folks.
Yep.
That. And where we're not wearing our white lab coats or anything. Right. We're just two fathers, two guys who have no experience as AODA counselors, just talking about our days and our triggers and what helps us to stay away from the bottle.
Yeah. And RJ, is that pretty much the way that this thing got started? I mean, I noticed that your first episode was in March of 2020.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just kind of... I guess lucky or unlucky that it just started there. It was just kind of like random.
Right.
I'd been on Mont's for like a year and a half to start one, actually. So when I was just starting going sober, one thing that I would do is listen to podcasts, and I would listen to Nerdist a lot. And that's Chris Hardwick. And for people who don't know about him, he's been sober for 20 years or so. All he does is he has a conversational podcast with famous people, and he's a comedian, so he's got funny stuff. But when he would get into stories with other people who were sober or just about his own story, it made me feel really good, like I wasn't alone. It made me feel like somebody else understands what I'm going through. So this is normal. Like this is not something that is just a me thing. And since then, I really wanted to kind of give back in a way. I've listened to podcasts because I don't like listening to the radio because the same songs every 5 minutes, right? Yeah. Like you only get, even on sports shows, you only get like 5 minutes of content and 5 minutes of commercials. And so I would listen to podcasts, and I really wanted to start a podcast. And Montee and I would go, we go golfing and we talk about our sobriety. And I'm like, we have some really good conversations. We should start a podcast. We should talk about this and record it. And finally in March of, 2020, we recorded 3 episodes and put them out. And we've just been trying to be better every week since then. So
you guys do a good job.
Thank you.
I found that podcasting is a really intimate medium. Because the listener they're usually listening on their phone, and they usually have earbuds, and they're hearing you right here in their their head, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I've even had some people tell me they fall asleep while they're listening to my podcast. And so it's a real personal, intimate experience, and it's perfect for recovery. And when people can hear their own stories through someone else, and that's usually the email that I get is, boy, it was so great to listen to that episode. That person had my story, and I've never heard that before, you know. And it's just incredible. So it's an amazing tool. A lot of people are using podcasts just as a tool of their recovery. It's something to put in your toolkit. I think it's great.
I agree. I think since kind of talking about, you know, it reinforcing my recovery journey as well. I think that's really what the podcast has done for myself, is got to a point where, you know, I still go see my same therapist guy. I love him to death. At first it was, you know, going to see him like 8 times a month. Now it's down to like once a month. But you know, this relationship now that I have with my recovery has become stronger.
Yes.
With this podcast, because it reinforces it, why I'm doing it, what's important to me. And also just by hearing myself state or share why I stopped drinking, again, helps me to remind myself, like, you know, hey, ever since I stopped drinking, you know, I haven't really had a bad experience with a police officer. So kind of just like reminding myself that.
It's one of the first things that I noticed. One of the first things I noticed from podcasting when I first got started some time ago was that I had to train myself to listen to my guest. And I would really focus on the listening. And I noticed that I would start doing that when I wasn't podcasting. So if I was at work or if I was talking to my wife, I was really practicing that skill of listening. And my wife would disagree with you to this day that I've gotten any good at it, but I think I've gotten a lot better. But yes, so for me, the podcast, it truly has been transformative because of all the people I've talked to. Their stories are still with me. You know, because, you know, you go through the editing process, you listen to them, they just become part of me. And so I've grown tremendously just from their stories. And then do you guys get feedback? Do you ever have people write you and thank you or tell you how much the podcast means to them or helps them?
Oh yeah. Go ahead, RJ.
How's that feel?
I'd love for you to share this. Yeah.
That's, you know, the first time it happens, it's like, you know, being told I love you by somebody for the first time, right? It's that warm feeling throughout your entire body. And, you know, it's happened a few times, and every single time it honestly feels like the first time a little bit. It just, it reinvigorates you. It fills you up knowing that's what, you know, we're trying to do. Everybody here is just let people know they're not alone and help them along. And when you hear that that's being accomplished, like, it's just, you know, it's affirmations really, what you're doing. So,
I mean, I love it. You know, we hit the year mark, earlier this year, obviously in March, and, you know, we're checking out our numbers and stuff. And, you know, we know we're not the biggest podcast ever. We got a tight knit group of folks. And once we hit that 1 year mark, you know, we were looking at our numbers and we're just like, okay, you know, we got to change some things up, maybe, you know, get some more traction here, maybe thinking about some stuff. But then we took a step back and we're like, but hold on a second, you know, we're receiving these messages from folks, even sometimes maybe just once a month. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. You know, I had to remind myself that where it's if we just help out one person, one family, then Untapped Keg did its job. A makeshift podcast in the basement. And if we help out one person or one family, then that's truly all that matters.
Yeah. It blows me away. I sometimes don't know how to respond. You know, I'm getting better at just saying, you know, thank you so much for listening and letting me know, you know, how this podcast has impacted your life. It has helped me just as much, you know. But it was really surprising to me in the beginning because I was just having fun. You know, I just like doing it. and I started learning that, wow, I'm really connecting. I'm connecting with people. They're connecting with me. And that has just been an amazing experience. But yeah, I occasionally get letters, emails, and yeah, it's kind of humbling in a way, because I wasn't, expecting that result, but that, especially now with COVID, people are using any kind of resource they can to enhance their recovery. And what's really kind of one of the benefits of COVID and so many people being isolated, is that we've had to find new ways of reaching out,
Yeah.
So now you guys are open about your recovery too. So you don't mind using your names. You're not anonymous, anything like that. How do you guys feel about that?
I think yeah, go ahead, RJ.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I don't think anything of it. Like when we started this, like I wanted to be vulnerable. I wanted to show people that it's okay to have these feelings and everything. Like, like I said, I'm almost 8 years. I still get cravings. Our latest episode, I had an uncle that recently passed, and
yeah, I was listening to that.
Went to his funeral, and I talked about how the pressures, the stresses, all the emotions coming in, it led to cravings. But I had, what I used before, which is cooking and listening to, some music from back in my high school days. And like that really brought me back to center and helped me out. And for me, I honestly don't even think twice about it until recently. My wife just said sometimes she worries that if we get too big, all our laundry is going to be out there. And I'm like, I did not even think about that.
Yeah.
So now I have to think about that.
Yeah.
This is kind of ironic you asked about that right now.
Oh, I thought you meant like figuratively too, right? You won't have time to do laundry.
Right.
Like the laundry's just going to be all over the place.
Right.
Yeah. Did you have any concerns about it, Montee? About just being out open? Out there?
Yeah, I felt, for many reasons. I think it's what our listeners deserve. It is our honesty, is our openness. Because we didn't want to start this and just not be honest. But for me, it's mutually beneficial. It's for our listeners, and it's for us as well too. Just being open and honest. And you will always have trolls. You'll have people that aren't going to believe you. You're going to have folks who are just going to give you the thumbs down. But at the end of the day, as I stated earlier, we're just hoping to just help one person, one family. Just shoot for that. We're shooting for that and continuously shoot for that. Maybe get one family a month. And that's our goal. So being open is the best route.
I agree, and I can't remember when it was that I shifted the podcast from being John S., Mr. Anonymous, who never showed his face or anything, to being John Sheldon on YouTube and out and open. But it was a really important shift for me to do that, because I was tired of having a secret life. My recovery was a secret. And that was one part of it. But the other part I didn't like is any time that I would dare to use my last name or go on YouTube or put a video out, I would immediately get shot down by people that I'm needing to be anonymous or something like that. So I just had to kind of rebel a little bit and say, God damn it, excuse me, but I'm going to do what I want to do. And I'm going to be open about my recovery, because the one thing that hurt me the most in my life about getting into recovery and getting help for mental health issues was stigma. Was the thing. And I think that the more that people speak openly about being in recovery, it reduces that stigma, because the stigma isn't just about being an addict or an alcoholic. The stigma is about just being a person in recovery.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you said that, because I've been reconnecting with folks who, once I decided to stop drinking, I kind of had to create a distance between our relationship because of some of the things that, they still party weekly and all that jazz. And that's just not my life anymore. But I've been reaching back out, talking to them. How have you been? What are you doing? And I feel that at times with them that and they don't mean to do that. like they need to coddle me just because I don't drink alcohol.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm okay. I'm fine.
Right.
I like everything's okay. You don't have to ask me if like all these questions like I'm a toddler. Although I respect it, but again, it's just that stigma.
Right.
I think it's just the unknown, folks not understanding a lot about the recovery world. And I guess that's what we aim for.
You know, one thing too with our podcast, I never called myself an alcoholic before we started the podcast. It was like 6 months in, I finally said the words out loud. Now it flows easy, right? I just told people I don't drink.
Right.
But Montee and I have talked about this before and we laugh about it, but I wonder if you have the same experience, and I'm guessing you do. When you tell people that you don't drink, do they instantly go, "Oh, I don't drink that often. I usually just drink on the weekends or like special occasions, but I just have one."
Right.
Does that happen to you?
Yes, it does. But I tell you what has happened to me that, well, here's the thing. One good thing about being open about it is I won't have this issue anymore. But I had a boss at work that would give me a hard time for not drinking. So I would be like at a work function where people are drinking and they have little tickets where you can get your drink and stuff. And then he would make fun of me because I don't have a use for my ticket or whatever. He would actually make fun of me for not drinking. And, you know, and he had no idea why I didn't drink. I have damn good reason for it. And if he knew how many people I know who died from it, he might not either. But you know, he would do that and I would just get uncomfortable and I would just leave, you know? But so I would have that experience, but that's kind of unusual to have somebody do that. But being open now, you know, if anyone wants to know why I don't drink, you know, I have good reason for it. And I can talk about recovery, which is more positive than just not drinking. Recovery is really, you know, it's a process of change that I've been going through ever since I was in my 20s, which was a long time ago. And I wouldn't change it for anything. And so, yeah, but I do get that occasionally where people become, you know, kind of like they talk about their own drinking. It's not, I really don't drink that much. So but,
yeah. And then, we do talk about that. And it's okay. It's okay. I'm always
really
just like,
okay.
just because I couldn't handle it doesn't mean you can't.
Oh, if you want to really kill someone's buzz and ruin a party, I've done this before. Okay. So I'm at a conference. Everybody's having a really great time. They're drinking or whatever. And for whatever reason, I decide to tell somebody I'm an alcoholic and I'm in recovery and everything. And people are just having a party. Oh, you know, I completely, you know, was the wet blanket. So there's a time and place for it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I enjoy what you said about it's a process. We talk about that a lot is because, you know, one of my favorite episodes that we did was an episode that it pretty much revolved around relapse. You know, because some folks, you know, you can get really stuck in counting the days and everything. And then if you do experience a relapse, some folks do think that the days that they stacked no longer matter, no longer count.
Like you haven't learned anything during that time.
Exactly. So that's why I really enjoyed what you said about just it's a process. This process is not supposed to be perfect. If it was perfect, there would still be no AA groups. There would be no NA groups.
Right.
There would be none of that. Like support groups are there because they know you're still going to have to deal with life. You're still going to have to face the music. You just don't have that, you know, self-medicating avenue anymore. So you may be stressed. You're going to stumble. You're going to fall. But still, just understand it's a process. And the days that you've accumulated prior to your relapse are still there. They still matter. You still did it. So I mean, it's a process. It's a process.
And you can look at improvement too. It's like, if let's say that you're a person who's drinking every other day and you're having serious life problems, and then you have a relapse and you drink one day. Well, if you just had a drink, if you just got drunk one day out of 3 years and you used to drink problematically regularly, that's improvement. It's not to be. So yeah, you don't have to start over from square one and relearn anything that you learned. You didn't forget anything. So
absolutely. But RJ, I'm still laughing, RJ, a little bit about the whole laundry thing.
Right?
Like I said, I thought it was a literal thing you were saying, like it's like literally, but no,
You're like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. Don't use puns because they go over your head. What are you talking about? I have quick reflexes. I would jump and catch it.
Right. Yeah.
So,
right.
So it's the Untapped Keg, and people can find you on Apple Podcast. Do you guys have a website that people can go to or anything like that?
Not yet.
You do have a YouTube channel though.
No, we don't. We don't have a website right now. If they just go to Twitter and search Untapped Keg, or if you go to YouTube and you search Untapped Keg, you can get all of our content there. We're also on Facebook. We have a Facebook group and a community. Basically, if you Google Untapped Keg, actually we pop up pretty high up on the list too. I actually think we are at the top, so we're lucky there. Nobody uses the Untapped Keg for anything, so we've been really lucky.
It's a great name, and I love your artwork too. You guys did a good job with that, and your sound quality is excellent, really from the very beginning. So you guys are doing a good job.
Thank you.
And I tell you what, I love being a guest on podcasts. I wish I knew somebody who had a podcast and a YouTube channel that might invite me to be a guest sometime, but we'll try to figure that out one of these days. So thank you guys both for being here. I really do appreciate it. So I'm going to play my song. How do I do that? Oh, here we go. Podcast can be so complicated. I got buttons to press. I've got people to talk to, places to go. So that's it. That's another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do that in a couple of ways. Go on over to our website, beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and click on the donate button. You can buy us a cup of coffee. You can be a member of our YouTube channel, or you can go to patreon.com/beyondbeliefsobriety and become a patron. I would appreciate it if you would support us. And Montee and RJ, thank you so much. Look forward to following more of your episodes and what you do on YouTube. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for having us.
Been great.
Thank you.